Hi everyone. Okay, so this is my last video in the series about the Dad Challenge podcast, and it's going to be a little bit more of an academic discussion. I suppose we're not going to be focusing as much on what he's doing, but I'm going to use his channel as a good jumping off point to talk about echo chambers in general. And we are going to have a look at how Josh's channel really fits well into the definition of an echo chamber. And before we get into that discussion, I just want to give an apology for my previous videos about the Dad Challenge podcast. The sound was absolutely dreadful. And I'm just really sorry. They're very difficult to listen to. Of course, if you want to hear what I had to say in those videos, you're welcome to go back and watch them. I didn't re-record them even though I knew the sound was bad, because I really liked the way that my commentary came out. And I just enjoyed the sort of stream of consciousness style of talking that I did in those videos. And I wanted to get all my thoughts out. And I wasn't really, too concerned about how the videos came out. I wasn't happy with the sound, of course, but I just didn't want to re-record them. But I have a proper microphone now, and the sound should certainly be a lot better in my videos from now onwards. I was using my previous laptop, which wasn't accepting the microphones that I was plugging in, and I didn't realize that. Anyway, the sound quality should be better from now onwards. So let's talk about an echo chamber. What is an echo chamber? Why do we need to know about echo chambers? How do we recognize an echo chamber? What's wrong with echo chambers? So first, my idea of an echo chamber is a community, and typically we see these communities online, but of course they can exist in the real world as well. It's a community where most of the members hold very similar opinions on a particular issue, and generally the focus of the group is on one particular issue or closely related issues. Generally, the people in the group feel strongly about a particular, what they perceive to be a problem. And everyone holds the same views, more or less. There might be shades of difference within those opinions, but they're all kind of clustered around the same viewpoint. And typically, in order to be a member of this group, you have to hold a similar opinion to the members of the group. And this is where we find the destructive nature of echo chambers, because dissent and disagreement is not really tolerated. The whole cohesion and unity of the group and of the mission of the group depends on everyone being united in their opinion. And so the underlying feeling is that you can't tolerate dissent because it weakens the mission, really. That is how I see an echo chamber. There's a lot to discuss and dissect when it comes to an echo chamber, and I'm going to cover as much of it as I can in this video, or as much as I have energy for, I suppose. So let's start with a short article that gives us the basics of what an echo chamber is and how they come into existence. So I like this article because it's fairly simple. And so bear with me. Just going to make myself really small. Okay. So, what is an echo chamber? Simply put, an echo chamber is an environment in which you're only exposed to opinions that are similar to your own. If you're only ever exposed to perspectives and opinions that are similar to your own, you're unfortunately stuck in an echo chamber. Social media platforms especially can easily trap you into an echo chamber without you even realizing it. And I would argue YouTube is particularly prone to trapping people into echo chambers. There are so many sort of subgenres of content on YouTube, and you can very easily find yourself in an echo chamber, even though you're consuming different content creators' videos. So, for example, if you were to go out in public right now and ask 100 people for their opinions on an issue like Brexit, it's very likely you will hear a variety of opposing opinions. However, that isn't always the case online. Here, you're more likely to only be exposed to opinions that are similar to your own. Why? Social media platforms are great at showing you the things it thinks you want to see. Their aim is to make your experience on their platform more enjoyable. And yeah, this is a good point. So sites like Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, even YouTube want you to stay on their sites for longer. They don't want to give you an uncomfortable or unpleasant feeling. They want to channel content that is really highly targeted or highly focused on you. They do the exact same things with the adverts that you see. And so when it comes to the content that you're likely to be suggested, it's going to be based on content that you have watched before. And in this way, the social media platforms are sort of leading you down a rabbit hole where you're seeing more and more content that is connected to things you're already interested in, things that you already might believe, things that are related to your own feelings, thoughts, and opinions. Social media platforms can understand your political beliefs from your activity online. This results in those platforms showing you content that aligns with your political opinions. It's also very likely that you'll follow people who have similar views to yours. You may also find yourself muting or blocking people that you disagree with. Okay, so why do people do this? Why do we want to see content that is similar to what we already believe? Why do we prefer to follow people who think similarly to ourselves? Why do we like to mute or block those whom we might disagree with or who might hold very different opinions? Well, it's the human egocentricity. You know, human beings like to look in the mirror. We like to see the world reflected back as it relates to ourselves. We don't really want to look around us and see things that are very, very different to ourselves. Human beings just like to naturally flock together with others who are similar to them. And although a tolerance for difference and even an enjoyment of difference is definitely something that we can cultivate, and I think it's very important to cultivate it. In general, it doesn't come very naturally to human beings. People like to think of themselves as right. They like to think of themselves as good. And so they seek out people and content that makes them feel that way. They want to, see famous and influential people expressing things that they agree with because it makes them feel better about themselves. So ultimately, people want to feel important. They want to feel as if there's a place for them. They want to feel as if there are lots of other people like them. And so it's really very normal and natural that we congregate towards people and viewpoints that kind of align with us, that we feel are in agreement with who we are. And conversely, of course, or similarly, we don't particularly like hearing about things that are very different from what we feel and believe and think. Opposing viewpoints are not particularly comfortable for people to listen to or to accept or to think about. It's a lot more work for our brains. It makes us feel as if we're not as right or as good as we thought we were. And most people, unfortunately, just simply don't have the maturity to sift through opposing viewpoints to find the good and the worthwhile. A lot of people would just simply rather block it out and go about their day because it's easier, it's more comfortable. The result of all of this, you have a social media feed packed with opinions that only match your own and people that all agree with you. You might be thinking, well, this sounds good to me. Of course I want to be surrounded by people that share the same views. Well, there are negatives to this. So what's so bad about echo chambers? Being stuck in an echo chamber can result in you wrongly believing your opinions are correct and or that everyone else agrees with you. So I think we see this a lot. You congregate towards pages and content and communities online that tend to align with your own opinions and beliefs. And this can mean that you surround yourself 24 hours a day with people who have similar views, similar feelings, similar thoughts and beliefs. And this can actually lead you to the false idea that everyone feels that way, or that a majority of people feel that way. And that's simply because you're not exposing yourself to people who think and feel differently. And not only that, but it also leads one to the false idea that you are correct and justified and that you have the moral high ground. When you're only being exposed to opinions that confirm what you already believe, you start to become entrenched in those opinions, and they actually start to take on a feeling of superiority to them. And people start to feel that those who don't share those opinions and beliefs are somehow wrong, somehow bad, somehow misguided, whatever the case may be. But you're tolerant. The more you surround yourself with opinions and beliefs and content that confirms what you already feel, the more you will alienate yourself from those who think and feel differently. Because you're following people that agree with you, they regularly share views that you agree with. This means you're only ever exposed to content that you agree with. This can give you a distorted view of reality. Echo chambers make it easy for anyone to fall into a trap in which most people in society agree with your opinions, or in which you think most people in society agree with your opinions. It makes it easy to forget that there are people out there that could completely disagree with you. In some cases, echo chambers can lead you to falsely believe that your opinion is simply correct. As individuals, we're at our best when exposed to different opinions, perspectives, and ideas, especially if you don't agree with them. Now, why is that? Why are people at their best when we're exposed to different thoughts and opinions and different information, especially if it's information we might not agree with, or opinions we might not agree with. And that's because that egocentric part of ourselves is being challenged and kept in check when we're exposed to lots of different viewpoints. It means that we're constantly having to question and examine ourselves, and that's how we develop self-awareness. If you don't get into the habit of thinking that every thought, every belief, every feeling that you have, every opinion that you have is right and correct, if you get into the habit of constantly questioning those opinions and checking them against new information that's coming in, you're more likely to be a well-rounded person and more likely to be a critical thinker, because it's a skill, it's a muscle that you have to exercise and develop, weighing up new facts and information and new perspectives. If you're only ever surrounded by information that confirms what you already believe, then that process of shaping your thoughts and your opinions isn't happening. That critical thinking just isn't happening, because you're actually, without realizing it, purposely blocking out any information that could challenge what you might already think or believe. Why? Well, here's just a few reasons. Being exposed to different opinions helps shape our own. That's what I just mentioned. It helps us understand how others feel and why they feel that way. And this is a very important point as well. As human beings, it's so important to understand where others are coming from if we hope to connect with them, if we hope to feel empathy and compassion, if we hope to build bonds and relationships and cooperate with one another. We need to understand the perspectives of others. If we're so entrenched in our own opinions and beliefs that we're incapable of understanding the viewpoints of those who feel totally differently from us, it's going to make us very difficult people to get along with. Just full stop, period. You cannot be a tolerant and amenable and agreeable person if you are convinced that you're always right. And I'm sure that we all know plenty of people who genuinely believe that whatever opinion they hold on a particular topic is the right one. There's no debate or discussion possible with such people. They believe that they are right. People who think differently are wrong. And there's no room for negotiation or discussion or debate. There's no room for being, for yielding or for changing your mind or for shades of meaning and conceding certain points. Unfortunately, the world is full of people like that, and those people are difficult to work with. They're difficult to get along with. They're difficult to be in relationships with. As human beings, we really have to develop the skill of putting ourselves in other people's shoes and trying to, not necessarily just disregard what you believe, but stay open to other viewpoints. The fact of the matter is, if your opinion and belief is sound, if it's strong, if it's got a good foundation, it's not going to waver and crumble just because you're exposed to people who think differently. So it allows us to become better at debating ideas with others, and it helps us grow as individuals, right? So the only way to grow as an individual is to evolve, to change, and to be open to the idea of being a different person today than you were yesterday, and a different person again tomorrow than you were today. And if you're hell-bent on sticking to the same thing that you thought 5 years ago and 10 years ago, and you refuse to entertain the possibility that, your opinion might change, or that new information might prove that you weren't as right as you thought you were, there is absolutely no way to grow as a person. Sometimes it's too easy to believe your opinion is correct and common sense. And I think we see this a lot with online echo chambers. People just kind of have this attitude of, oh, well, of course you think this. Why wouldn't you? A good, decent person is bound to think X, Y, and Z. And, a lot of the time there just simply isn't that acknowledgement of, well, no, actually, it isn't, opinions are not always common sense. And there isn't necessarily a right or common sense viewpoint on any issue. I think there are certain fundamentals that most people can agree on. But with the vast majority of issues, there is a wide spectrum of beliefs, and if you really examine, if you take the time to examine each of those beliefs and opinions, you'll find that there's merit in all of them. And so the idea that there is one right or common sense opinion on an issue is incredibly arrogant, and it's frankly just intellectually lazy. So this is the danger with echo chambers. Yet all it takes is for someone with opposing views to make an argument that you never thought of. Suddenly your opinion has changed, and/or you have a new understanding of the subject. So there are many, many issues, so many issues on which my opinion has changed completely over the years. Where I hold a completely different viewpoint now than I did 5 or 10 years ago. And that is simply just from being exposed to people who think differently from me. And I have a friend who said, or who says that he tends to trust his opinion on something more if it has changed completely from what it used to be. And I think there's a lot of merit to that. If you're of an opinion now that is entirely different from what it was a few years ago, it means that you are someone who is open to having your mind changed. It means that you're someone who's open to new information, and that it is possible for your opinion and belief to change, even, 180 degrees. That is a good thing. Some people might look at that and say, oh, well, that person just obviously never really felt very strongly about that issue. And that's not the case at all. Sometimes you can feel very strongly about a particular issue, but because you are willing to be open to new ideas, new opinions, new information, it can kickstart a process of questioning and thinking, okay, well, maybe I'm not actually right about this issue. Maybe this warrants further investigation. And, before you know it, you are having to concede that, yes, my opinion has changed completely from what it used to be. And that's a good thing. That means that you're evolving. That means that you're maturing and seeing the shades and nuances that there are in a particular issue. Echo chambers also allow disinformation and misinformation to spread easily among certain people on social media. So how to know if you're in an echo chamber? It's extremely difficult to recognize if you're in an echo chamber. Sadly, we're all guilty of being stuck in them. The best thing you can do is to stay alert and question yourself. So, I have definitely noticed that it is incredibly difficult for people who are stuck in an echo chamber to recognize that they're in an echo chamber. And why is that? It's because they have become entrenched in the moral high ground. They believe that they're right, as we've talked about from reading this article. They believe they're correct. They believe that they have the superior opinion. They believe that they're good people and that whatever they think about a particular issue is the right or common sense way to think about it. And that's why it's incredibly difficult for them to accept that the setting or environment that they find themselves in is not healthy and might even be quite toxic and almost authoritarian in nature. People don't want to accept that because they think they're doing a good thing. They believe that, that this opinion, this community that they find themselves in, this mission that they're on, is, really has merit and value. And for them to accept that maybe it's not as pure or as good as they once thought it was is very difficult. It means accepting, for a lot of people, it means accepting that they themselves maybe are not perfect, not flawless, and didn't see some of the signs that they were heading down the wrong path. So yes, it's very difficult for people to recognize or even accept that they're in an echo chamber. But if you're watching for the signs as you go along, as you are navigating your way online, hopefully you will avoid falling into an echo chamber before you become too entrenched in it. So think about these things. Are you always exposed to one side of the story? Do you find yourself agreeing with what everyone is saying on your social media feed? Are a lot of the news stories you read based on rumors or information without evidence or sources? If so, you may have found yourself in an echo chamber. Don't worry, I have some tips to help get you out. How to avoid or escape an echo chamber. Luckily, leaving an echo chamber is the easy part. It takes some courage and resilience, but it's worth a try. Here are some of the things you can do. Find people who are with different views to your own. Follow them on social media. It's okay to disagree with what people are saying without needing to constantly argue with them. Yeah, and I think this is an important point. You don't necessarily have to correct or have a debate with every single person who has a different opinion. It is okay for different opinions to exist in the world. We don't all need to think the same way. There is room for lots of different perspectives, lots of different thoughts and beliefs, and we don't always need to try and bring other people around to our way of thinking. It's a really good habit to practice, to just accept other people for who they are. And if they seem open to a discussion and a debate, if they are receptive, if they ask you for your viewpoint, or if they're inviting debate, then sure, by all means, respectfully debate with other people. There's nothing wrong with that. That's really healthy, actually. But understand that it's not really our job to convert or change other people's opinions all the time. That's for them to do for themselves if they believe it's worthwhile. And it doesn't make people wrong. It doesn't make them bad people. It doesn't make them less evolved or less, worthy. It doesn't make them not as good a person as you. It just means that they're in a different place in their thought processes, and that really is okay. So always question what you're reading online. Double check the sources, find the facts. Oh my goodness, I really do wish people put more stock and more emphasis and weight on good quality sources. It just amazes me and really horrifies me how much people believe what they read online without questioning and fact-checking what they're reading, or at least just staying critical and staying skeptical, which is very important. Literally anything can be published on the internet, and even if it's being touted as fact by a content creator that you really respect, and that you think would never deceive you. Understand that a lot of misinformation is spread without people realizing that it's misinformation. Many people are just, and that includes content creators, are just simply lazy, and they just regurgitate what they have found online. And there isn't always a lot of research being done or a lot of kind of critical analysis being done. So stay skeptical, stay critical, and before you become too kind of entrenched in an opinion on a particular subject, look for lots of different sources about that topic. It's very likely that your opinion will undergo quite a transformation the more that you read on a particular topic. And read sources from different sides of the topic as well. So don't block or mute people with different views to your own unless they're causing you grief. I agree with this. I think people are far too quick to block and mute others and to say, okay, well, I don't like what this person is saying. I don't agree with it, and hence I'm just going to block this person. No. Oh, goodness. Yeah. This is something that I just, it really makes me shake my head. It really causes me a lot of concern how free people are with that blocking button, and fair enough, if someone is harassing you, if they are being abusive, if they are overstepping your boundaries, then blocking is appropriate, muting is appropriate. But unfortunately, all too often we see content creators or people who consider themselves to be influential having people, coming to their social media posts or their content. You have, people, their followers, pointing out problems with what they're saying, and those content creators or influencers just simply blocking those people or deleting comments or muting that person because they don't want any disagreement. They don't want to be challenged. They want to continue to enjoy this position of superiority. They want to continue to say what they want to say, unchecked, unchallenged, uncriticized. That is a big problem. If someone cannot tolerate any kind of criticism or any kind of challenge whatsoever, without muting people, blocking them, attacking them, that is a very, very big red flag. So read news from multiple sources. Avoid getting your news from just one source. News platforms can be biased too. Yeah, absolutely. That's what I was saying earlier. You'll find that if you consciously and proactively go and seek out news sources from different sides of a particular issue, you will come across all kinds of information that you would not have got otherwise. And that can shape your opinion in a whole new different direction. And try to trust yourself as you navigate information online. Trust yourself that you will be able to sift and weigh the information and critically analyze it to come to an opinion that feels right to you. Don't be afraid of seeking out news sources that are from a different side of the issue or a different side of the political spectrum from your own. If you, as I mentioned before, if your opinion is really that strong, if it really has a strong foundation, it can withstand being exposed to different points of view. Even if you don't think you're in an echo chamber, try the above out. You'll soon find yourself exposed to more opinions and people you never knew existed. You won't always agree with them, but that's okay. Remember, they're not your enemies, they just have different views. Exactly. So someone who has a different opinion is not an enemy, unless as I mentioned, unless they're behaving in an abusive way, unless they're overstepping personal boundaries, we need to get out of this way of thinking that people who have different beliefs, different opinions to share, different perspectives are haters or trolls, or that they are that they are somehow, an enemy that needs to be fought. We see far too much of that online, and really, it's there's this righteous anger towards people who have a different point of view, and really, what it is it's intolerance. It's insecurity on the part of that person who doubts their own ability to tolerate a different point of view, a different perspective. And as I have said a few times now, if your opinion really is that strong, if you are that confident in what you feel and in what you believe, you really should be able to withstand challenge and critique and debate. And if someone cannot tolerate any sort of challenge at all, that is a big red flag that you should take what they're saying with a grain of salt, a big grain of salt. Okay, so let's talk about the Dad Challenge podcast and how he meets the definition for some of these elements of an echo chamber that we've been speaking about. Okay, so let's talk about Josh from the Dad Challenge podcast specifically, and how his particular echo chamber has evolved. So if we look at Josh's early content, he kind of dabbled around in different kinds of content, sort of hoping to find his niche, I think. And I think a lot of his earlier content comes across as a lot more genuine, a lot more sincere, because he seemed to be genuinely speaking about topics he was passionate about. He had his series where he was talking about the church and his experiences as a pastor and being very burnt out and the problems with modern churches. And I felt that in those videos he came across as very genuine and and I think he had a really legitimate issue to talk about, and I've spoken in other videos about how I would have liked to see more of that sort of content. But I don't think that content gave him the kind of following and the sort of growth of his channel that he would have liked to see. We also saw him dabbling a little bit in talking about car detailing. That didn't really take off. For a short while, he had a podcast with Chelsea Suarez, and that didn't really succeed much either. She distanced herself from that project. We don't really know the reasons, but I can guess. And so some of Josh's attempts to kind of gain a foothold on YouTube and to gain a following haven't really worked out. And I think, to me anyway, it was very clear that he was trying very hard to hit a nerve or try and find the right kind of sweet spot where he would have his own kind of loyal following of people who wanted to tune in to listen to him. And it was only really when he started speaking about Micah Stouffer and his strong feelings about family bloggers that the kind of attention that he was looking for started to come his way. And initially he gained a foothold by talking about the exploitation of children, because I think deep down this is something Josh cares about, albeit maybe not as much as he tries to portray on his channel. I don't know that that's necessarily the main reason why he makes the content that he makes, because he's super concerned about the children, although I do believe a certain amount of his concern is sincere. But it was really when he started talking about Micah Stouffer that he started to gain a large following, and people started to kind of sit up and take notice of his channel. And he tapped into a demographic of people who not only were concerned about the exploitation of children on YouTube and other social media platforms, but who just disliked family vlogging parents in general. And let's face it, there's probably a lot to point to in family vlogs to dislike. They're putting their parenting skills and families on display for the whole world to see. And it's not too difficult to look at these families and find plenty to criticize. And I bet you that there are lots of people, all over the world who strongly disagree with the way these families are conducting themselves, and they've taken that a step further, and it's kind of been commuted into a dislike of these family vloggers as people. It's not a very big jump for most people to go from disagreeing with someone's behavior to disliking them as a person. And this is what Josh tapped into, I think. He tapped into a whole market of people, or a whole audience of people who disliked family vloggers as people, who actually had a personal kind of axe to grind with these family vlogs, like just didn't like them, found them annoying, found them problematic, found them unlikable, and Josh gave people with these feelings and these opinions a whole platform on which they could just give free rein to their dislike of family vloggers. And personally, this is what I have witnessed. And it began with Micah Stouffer. It began with talking about the whole incident with Huxley. And not too long after that, it wasn't long before Josh started to steer his discussion towards how annoying Micah was as a person, and all her mannerisms and habits, and her grammar, her way of speaking, her name, her choice of names, her dancing, her cooking, you name it. It took a whole kind of life of its own, where he started and he started to notice that there was an audience for that sort of content. A lot of people didn't like her, not just didn't like what she did with Huxley, but just didn't like her. She's not a likable person to watch. People found her annoying. And Josh himself probably feels that way. And so he realized that he had kind of tapped into probably a market or an audience that hadn't really been tapped into before. People who just wanted a place that they could go to let off steam about these very unlikable characters like Micah Stouffer. And there are lots of others like her who are just, not, there are people who are easy to dislike. And yet I think the fact that this had all come from an initial concern about Huxley, and in many cases, supposedly where this snarking content, it originates in a concern for the children, that is also the justification that that people use to, anytime you question the nastiness of the content, anytime you question the bullying and the prejudice and the fact that it's, Josh's content is really very, kind of, it's just unkind, it's nasty, it's mean. It's not difficult for his audience to pedal back slightly and say, oh, well, it actually comes from concern for the children. There's not, most people don't find that to be a big jump. For me, it's a very big jump, but for a lot of people, it's, they can easily justify it to themselves. Okay, so we talked about how there is that very fine line that a lot of people walk between condemning someone's behavior and having a problem with someone's behavior and condemning them as a person, disliking the behavior and the actions and disliking the person. And for a lot of people, that line is really fluid, or they have no problem crossing that line on a regular basis, where it's, well, this person did this horrible thing, and therefore I'm justified in attacking them as a person. And because there are so many people who think that way, you're not going to find a whole lot of people coming out in defense of someone who's done a horrible thing. If someone like Micah Stouffer, who's done a horrible thing, what she did with Huxley, if you come out and criticize something about her, even if it's completely irrelevant to the whole Huxley incident, you're not going to have a whole lot of people piping up in her defense and saying, well, maybe you shouldn't say that. It's got nothing to do with how she treated Huxley. That's, kind of not really relevant to the conversation. And this is what we see with Josh's channel. He goes to a certain amount of effort to make sure that you know about the wrong actions that the people he's talking about have done. So he paints out in, excruciating detail all the problems with family vlogging parents, the things that they've done, which he considers to be wrong and unethical and problematic. And a lot of people watching what he has to say and seeing him lay out these facts about the horrible things they've done couldn't disagree with that. Yes, a lot of them have done problematic things, but having laid that out, it's a very, very small jump to then start attacking them as people. And because he's just spent all this time, laying out the facts about the horrible things that they've done, you're not going to have people jumping up to defend these people, to defend these family bloggers. They're not going to say, okay, well, yeah, okay, they might have done these horrible things, but when you criticize the clothes that they're wearing or the way they do their hair or the names that they've chosen for their children, that really has nothing to do with their horrible behavior. Most people are not going to be willing to put their heads above the parapet and say that. And let's talk about why. Why are people unwilling to stand up for those who are unlikable? I mean, first of all, it comes down to group dynamics a lot of the time. Josh's audience have found a certain amount of acceptance. Josh himself has found a certain amount of acceptance amongst his followers and his audience, where they put him on a pedestal and, he is their content creator. He is this influencer who has a large following. That feeds his ego to a certain extent. He wants to continue to enjoy that position. His audience at the same time are getting something out of this exchange. They've found a community of people who also dislike family vloggers. They enjoy the snarking that helps them to let off steam and vent their frustration. It makes, let's face it, when we criticize, when human beings criticize others, a lot of it has to do with the fact that it makes us feel better about ourselves. We can pat ourselves on the back. If we look at family vloggers and the fact that they're horrible people, we believe they're horrible people. And, a lot of people then pat themselves on the back and, congratulate themselves for not being that way. And so it's kind of enjoyable. So Josh's audience gets a certain amount of enjoyment out of the content that Josh is creating. They like bullying these family vlogging parents. They enjoy the snark and the nastiness, because they feel justified, because they think these people are horrible people. B, because it makes them feel better about themselves, and C, because it gives them a feeling of community. It comes down to group dynamics. They feel as if they're accepted by others who have a similar opinion. And this is, these are the factors that help to cement an echo chamber in place. And so we see a very powerful example of an echo chamber with Josh's channel. Now, when you add to that the fact that Josh himself has shown himself to be a person who cannot tolerate being challenged or criticized, we have countless examples of people who have called him out for problematic things that he has done. And he has yet to really kind of humbly put his hand up and say, you know what, I shouldn't have done that, and walk his behavior back and, keep himself in check. He's notorious now for not being able to accept criticism. He's notorious for blocking people. He's notorious for deleting comments. He's notorious for calling people haters and attacking those who dare to challenge him. And all the hallmarks that we see of someone who is the leader of an echo chamber. This is always what you see. They start to disparage those who criticize them and disagree with them, and they call them haters and trolls and, whatever they can do to paint that person who disagrees with them as an enemy. And there's a lack of self-awareness, there's a lack of humility, and a lack of being able to analyze your own opinions and thoughts and behaviors and, put checks and balances in place to make sure that you are being appropriate and that you are behaving in a way that you can be proud of. There isn't a single one of us that walks this earth who doesn't need checks and balances. Most people are arrogant enough to believe that they will be able to see problems in their own behavior themselves. They think they will automatically know when they've done something wrong. And that's just simply not the case. When you're in an echo chamber, you are surrounded by people who are affirming and validating your every move most of the time. They have a strong incentive for doing that. Everyone wants to be accepted by the group. People all want to feel as if they are right and justified in what they're saying and doing and believing. So there's very little incentive for those who are inside the echo chamber to challenge one another, and especially to challenge the leader of that echo chamber. And so when you step out of line, as we all do as human beings, we are not perfect, we are fallible, we are subject to all kinds of errors in judgment and, narrow-minded ways of thinking. All of us fall into those traps at some point. But the things that keep us in check are influences from the outside, people saying, wait, hang on a moment, what you're doing there is not right, and people giving us feedback, and people offering us criticism, people challenging us and daring to say, I don't agree with you. And these are the factors that keep us in check and that force us to examine ourselves and say, okay, well, was that right? Do I need to check myself here? But when you're inside an echo chamber, and especially if you are deleting and blocking people who are giving you that sort of challenge, that sort of criticism, you're not getting that. You're becoming just further and further entrenched in your way of thinking and behaving. And this is very much what we see with Josh, someone who started off possibly with good intentions, and various factors along the way have shaped him into someone who is very, very dogmatic and very, very authoritarian, really. And I think the saddest and most ironic part is he probably wouldn't see it that way at all. He really does still see himself as very much morally justified, someone who very much has the moral high ground, someone who is a good and righteous person who is fighting for the underdog, fighting for what's right. He has actually got himself to a point where he can just ignore any kind of voices and any kind of outside influence that suggests that what he is doing might not be completely right. And that is, to me, it's really quite astounding. I don't know how someone gets to that point of arrogance that they are not able to take a step back and objectively look at their own behavior at all. They have such tunnel vision at that point. They are so firmly entrenched in their way of seeing themselves and the world that they've lost any kind of ability to be objective about anything that they say and do. And unfortunately from there, things only get worse. Content creators like Josh not only need to create an echo chamber to kind of continuously boost themselves and to keep this image going and to block out this sort of criticism. Not only do they need to do that, but in some ways they actually need to up the ante. They need to keep intensifying the content because there's this kind of insatiable need to keep affirming and keep boosting yourself. People who have no ability to check themselves and accept criticism are also desperately insecure. And this is something I have felt about or believed about Josh right from the beginning. He's a desperately insecure person who has a limited ability to recognize his own insecurity. And so there's a greater and greater need for others to boost your sense of self because you're not able to do that for yourself. You're not able, that internal validation isn't there. That ability to kind of hold yourself up from the inside isn't there. I also want to talk just briefly about what I believe are Josh's feelings about women and mothers in particular. Josh is very open about the fact that he had a very, horrible childhood. His mother was very neglectful. She left him alone for long periods of time when he was a child. He had to fend for himself quite a lot. She brought strange men into the home all the time. She was off partying and leaving Josh and his sister by themselves. She was not a good mother, and Josh talks a lot about how he was abused and very poor, and his childhood honestly sounds like a very traumatic time in his life. And I don't get the sense from what Josh has shared about his childhood that he has worked through those issues. Those sorts of experiences leave a very profound impact on a person. And if you don't work through them in a self-aware, conscious way with someone who can guide you, those issues are going to create major imbalances in the way that you see the world and in your perspectives and feelings about other people. How can they not? And I very much believe that without being completely conscious of it, Josh has taken on all kinds of opinions and beliefs about women, and what they should be, what women's natures really are, how mothers should behave. And he is very much using his channel to project all of those beliefs onto the mothers and the women that he speaks about. His own hurt and pain and anger from his childhood is for me, it's just coming out in an unrelenting stream on his channel. It's very, very obvious to me in the way that he speaks about the women, these family vloggers. And I can also see that he doesn't realize that's what he's doing. He doesn't realize that it's coming from his own past of abuse and neglect. He really thinks that the values and the opinions that and beliefs that he is expressing about these mothers that he talks about are what's right or common sense, as we read about in the article. He really thinks that his viewpoint is the correct one. It's the morally superior one. And it's never really occurred to him that there might be a whole world out there of people who think very differently about women and about mothers from how he thinks. And this is evident in a lot of right-wing posts that Josh has made on social media that you can go and look for. He has some incredibly conservative, right-leaning viewpoints that he's expressed, and he's shown himself to be a very intolerant person when it comes to people who don't fit a certain very narrowly defined mold. And unfortunately, a lot of the time what we see with people like that is for them, it's not even a question of opinion or belief. It's a question of right and wrong. And they believe that they are the kind of sole custodians of the right way of thinking. And we see this with Josh and his opinions on things like, sex and alcohol and how women should dress and how women should look and how they should behave. His opinion on LGBTQ issues, his opinion on unmarried parents, all these sorts of things. Unfortunately, I think that, in my opinion, Josh found a certain amount of solace and a certain amount of salvation in the church. He talks about how the church rescued him from his really horrible childhood. And I think in many ways, he started to associate those very traditional Christian values with the right way of looking at the world, and everyone else, that doesn't fit into that mold is wrong and therefore abusive and neglectful, like his mother. So in my opinion, that's how it's playing out. And I think that there are lots of people who feel that way and who come to Josh's channel in order to see those beliefs confirmed for themselves. And a lot of people who dislike family vloggers and dislike the women who are involved in family vlogging channels because they embody a lot of those behaviors or ways of living their lives that such people don't agree with. And in Josh, they've found this kind of poster boy for someone who has given them a whole platform to talk about these people in the nastiest, most snarkiest way you can possibly imagine. And I would just ask Josh a question very straight out. What is Christian about that? I mean, I wonder if he even hears how judgmental he sounds, and how arrogant and how condescending he sounds. And in what world is that a Christian way of being towards other people? So Josh has created a whole kind of community on the internet of people who agree with his content and people who have a strong incentive not to challenge him. And so under those sorts of conditions, an echo chamber is created very easily. It's, Josh's echo chamber is thriving and alive and well. And I mean, I would love to see self-awareness dawning on Josh and on the people who follow him. But unfortunately, a lot of the time, that just doesn't happen, because self-awareness is something that comes with a great deal of critical thinking. It comes with humility. It comes with maturity. And many people who fall into echo chambers haven't developed those sorts of qualities. They're not the skills required to take a step back from what you're doing and thinking are just not there. And I think it's terribly sad, because a lot of the people who agree with Josh are probably never going to backpedal and never going to maybe concede that they might have become a little bit extreme and might have been mistaken, and they're just going to double down and become more entrenched in their viewpoints. And of course, that's not what I want to see. I would very much like to see people becoming more self-aware, people becoming more critical in their thinking, people becoming more questioning, and people starting to see the red flags with Josh's content. That is what I would like. And, who knows? I'll hold out hope. I'll keep... I don't watch Josh's content anymore. I just can't. I can't get through it. But I will keep an eye on the situation and what's happening. And let's hope that... Let's hope that this has a more positive outcome than I am foreseeing. But I think Josh is someone who's going to crash and burn ultimately, or else he's going to become kind of a sad parody of himself, which I think is a little bit tragic. I think it's a waste of a person who probably at one point had a lot to offer and still has a lot to offer, but he's become blinded by his own egocentricity and his own fear and hate and insecurity. It's really sad to see. So we'll leave it there. And if you guys have thoughts about echo chambers or about the Dad Challenge podcast and how it has become an echo chamber, I'd love to hear what you have to say. Feel free to share your thoughts with me. And I will see you in the next video.